It's review 17A. Welcome back. I'm the Whiskey Anorak, sat in my bedroom, about to review another bottle of single malt whiskey for you. This time from Islay, unpeated Bruichladdich, the classic laddie, 10-year-old. So, welcome. Like I said, thank you for joining me. I've noticed recently there's been quite a few more subscribers and views that I've been getting, so thank you for that. I'm glad that I'm starting to reach more people, and it just tells me that what I'm doing might be on the right lines, which is, completely independent. I buy everything that I review. I give you my honest opinion. Try not to be too poetic with the smell and taste notes and try and keep it a bit more grounded. Try and focus more on the quality of what's in the bottle, and also, give some side information about particular whiskies and stuff like that, stuff surrounding it in the B episodes. So this, like I say, it's Bruichladdich, the classic laddie, 10-year-old. And I've not had this exact bottle before, but I've had the previous edition that was released quite a long time ago, which was my introduction to Bruichladdich, which was the classic laddie, which didn't have an age statement, was known to be about 6 or 7 years old-ish, but it was a non-age statement bottling. This is now a age statement bottling. This particular one was bottled in 2025, I believe, and there is a little bit of information on it, which does say, yeah, 4th of the 8th, 2025 was when this was bottled. And something that I only noticed recently, actually, because something that you'll notice about that straight away is I can't look through it and see any sediment because it's completely opaque with this sort of turquoise coating that it's got on it, which, for me is a bit annoying. I'd rather be able to see inside, but they have stuck with this branding for the classic laddie for many, many years. So that's just what they want to do. I wish that I could see inside it a bit better. But, when you rotate the bottle, there is a hell of a lot of writing on there. There's so much, and it's because there's so much, it can be easy to actually miss the important information, because some of the information on there, in my opinion, is marketing speak bullshit, really, which I'm not a fan of. But some of it is actually really genuinely good information. Let's see if I can find the good information here. And I've just found it: unchill filtered, colouring free, using Islay spring water. It's bottled at 50%, which is great. And this is a standard bottling, I would say, for Bruichladdich. And if you stick around for part B, 17B, I'll be talking about standard bottlings, what they are, why we should go to them, and what they sort of aren't as well, and I'll have some examples to show you for that. But this is a standard bottling, I'd say, and one of the things that is very interesting is it has a 5-digit code. So my particular code here is 25/127. If you go onto the website, you can actually see full details of the cask breakdown that was used in your particular bottling, which is quite unusual for a standard bottling, to be honest. The only ones who give that sort of level of information really is Octomore, and to be fair, Octomore can give even more information than what's done here. But what's done here is they list all of the cask types that were used, previous contents, the vintage, where the barley was from. They don't always say the barley variety, but they do say whether it's from the Scottish mainland, whether it's from Islay. In a couple of cases they did mention the variety, but it's not always. And it says the previous contents, how many times it was used, that kind of thing. All really useful information that, maybe they could fit on here if they didn't have all the other writing about progressive Hebridean distillers and all this stuff about B Corp. And yeah, it's very heavy on the writing. But how is it in the glass? What I'm going to do, I'm going to smell it, give you the sensations, the texture, the taste notes, add some water, do the same again, and then I'll introduce the bottles which are going to appear in the comparison. So this time, very rare for this channel, there isn't going to be a public vote this time. I'm sorry for that, but the reason will become apparent at the end of the episode, hopefully, and hopefully it'll make sense to you why I've chose 2 bottles myself to compare to on this particular occasion. In the series after this, the 18 series, we'll be back to normal. There'll be the public vote and everything, so it's not gone away. It's just that I specifically want to compare this to 2 others. So I'll start smelling and tasting this now. I'll add water, then I'll give a little bit of a background about Bruichladdich and my experience with Bruichladdich and things like that. So let's get into the nose then. What's it like? Fresh, coastal, quite fruity, quite elegant. So I've got a heavy nose, although there is a creaminess to it. It's quite malty. There's a touch of a farmy sort of dunnage note to it as well. There's a little bit of a light vanilla note, definitely on the lighter fruit end, some white grapes. Yeah, classic bourbon nose. There is different casks other than bourbon in here, ex-bourbon. There's some red wine casks, but it's mostly the bourbon that's speaking out cask-wise. Yeah, very complex whiskey, especially for a standard bottling, 10 years old. Not particularly old, but there's a lot going on here. Some of that is the production methods that they use. Some of it is the cask choice that they've selected for this as well. And this being a standard expression means that obviously it's still going to have batch variation, but they're trying to get a particular profile for this 10-year-old which they can repeat, essentially. But I'll go into this sort of stuff more in the B episode. So let's talk about the texture of this now. Medium oily, no obvious heat, little bit towards the back, not too much. It's quite drying actually as well. Reason for it being drying, tannins that come from the woods, pores and stuff like that that seep out into the whiskey as it matures. When they interact with your saliva molecules, basically they make them bunch up, which you perceive as being a drying feeling, and that's the reason why you get that particular sensation. So it's quite drying. Now, there is red wine cask, ex-red wine cask in here, so it could be some of that. It could be that perhaps they're using, and I think I did see that they're using quite a few refill casks, like second fill. So the previous contents, you know, in terms of the bourbon has sort of come out a bit, and you're getting access more deeper into the wood, getting some more tannins come out, and that could be why it's quite drying. But it's not overly drying. It's quite juicy at the start, lightly oily, and then goes to drying after that. Sensations then? Salty, not sweet, quite bitter, a little touch of sour, no savoury. But it's quite sharp with it. It's changing quite a lot. It's dynamic, which is a great sign. By the way, my co-star is still here, the fan again, because although it has cooled down in the UK now, as I record this, inside my house is still like almost like a furnace. So the fan will remain for the 17 series of reviews, I'm afraid. So yeah, so the texture is definitely quite interesting on this. I have to say it's quite dynamic. Let's do the taste notes. Floral, light, refined to some degree, although there's a, towards the back there is a heaviness, is a bit of a lactic note that's coming through. It's got like a creamy vanilla, some pineapple, a bit of apple, definitely quite a lot of citrus coming in. Like I'm getting quite a bit of grapefruit from this. It's fresh, it's coastal, it's got that saltiness, and you know, all of Bruichladdich casks are matured on site next to the coast. They don't ship them off anywhere to a central warehouse, they're all stored where they are, and you can definitely pick out that coastal, and there's a minerality to it as well, which isn't quite as strong in this expression as in some other expressions that I've got, particularly the bare barley version is intensely mineral and flinty sort of notes you get from that. It's still there here, but not quite as strong. So it's an interesting taste, and it's going to change when you add water, which is what I'm going to do now. So I've added about half a teaspoon, just over. So because we can't see inside the bottle to see if there's any sediment in there, which is quite annoying, instead we have to rely on whether we can see the symmetry, which we can, and whether it goes cloudy when you add water, which it does. So that's a good sign. Can I see any tiny little particles swimming around in there? Not really with this light, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is, because that symmetry is pretty thick, to be honest. Okay, so whilst it's opening up, what can I sort of talk to you about Bruichladdich and its production methods a little bit. Something interesting to note is that they have quite tall stills, which I think is responsible for some of that elegant nature that you're getting come through there. But the production methods, it's a bit of a mixed bag with Bruichladdich in terms of what they're going for. So there's lightness to it, but there's also a bit of a heavier lactic presence to it, and it's got quite a lot of body, considering it's quite light in terms of the notes that you get off it. Some of the reasons for that, I think, and bearing in mind, I'm going to talk about some of the production methods here, but these can change, you know, and on particular batches and runs, distilleries can change how they do it. So you can never sort of say it's set in stone that they always use this fermentation time, you know, they always run the stills in this particular way. We can't say that. There is information out there, but the most important thing is that we smell and taste it ourselves and try and not ignore the facts, but try and treat that as adjacent to our sensations as well, because how whiskies are produced does change. And how this is produced, quite interesting, they use an open cast iron mash tun basically for the wort, and what they do is they have an old school rake and plough style, and they have quite a cloudy wort. Now a cloudy wort means that there's more solid particles in it, less concentration of sugar, but which essentially is the same as saying the specific gravity of it is less, right? Which is more of an old school way of doing things, which if you read this book that I'm reading at the moment, The Distillation of Whiskey, you find that the specific gravity, which is essentially the concentration of sugar, tended to be lower than it is now. So the yield was lower. That's what that means, is less sugar really for the yeast to go at, but there is more solid particles for the secondary sort of fermentation that happens in terms of like the lactic fermentation. And in terms of fermentation at Bruichladdich, it's quite long, over 100 hours in some cases, so you're getting that lactic sort of, you know, formation, getting some creamy notes from it and a few of the farmy notes as well from that extended fermentation. And like I said, everything's matured on site. So that's some interesting things to know about them. You have to know as well that the distillery was shut from, I think it was between 1994 and 2001, when it was rescued by the owners, the then owners of Murray McDavid Independent Bottlers. And for a time, the two were basically the same entity until Remy Cointreau bought them out in around 2013, something like that, I think it was. And they eventually sold off the independent bottler side to ACO Limited. So they don't have that, so Remy Cointreau only have Bruichladdich now. But I will say, largely speaking, apart from some very expensive bottlings, I do think that under the new ownership it hasn't been affected that much. Now, is the whiskey being produced now the same quality as it was when the distillery just reopened in the early 2000s? Possibly not, but I do think they are keeping the quality up, and although they do these very expensive bottlings like the Black Art ones and obviously some of the Octomores and things like that, I do think generally speaking they are keeping available standard versions and versions that go out to independent bottlers which are more affordable, so that's great. In terms of my experience, before I start smelling and tasting this again, I've got quite a few bottles. I've had quite a few bottles over the years. Currently I've got some absolute banger bottles in my opinion. I've got a Chalton whiskey version which is heavily peated, but it's called Bruichladdich. Not Port Charlotte or Octomore. I've got a Artful Dodger and a Little Brown Dog, all 22 years old and all completely different from each other. But to be honest, one of my favourite bottlings is actually going to be coming up in a couple of reviews time, which is the Bear Barley version. Absolutely amazing bottling. But as a standard bottle, you can't go far wrong with this. If you've not tried Bruichladdich, absolutely excellent place to start. Natural colour, non-chill filtered, bottled at a higher 50%, and yeah, it shows. So let's get back into the nose on this one. What have we got with the addition of water? Anything else coming out? Yes. A lot more malty, a lot more creamy, more grain forward, but also vanilla. That mineral note is coming out on the nose even more strongly now. I was getting it mostly on the taste before. but very citrus, grapefruit, lemon rind. It's yeah, very floral as well. It's a really good mix. It's got delicate notes, but it's also got heavier, creamy lactic notes as well. And it's you could spend a long time smelling and tasting this, and I intend to after I finish this video. Anything else? It's perhaps getting a little bit of a sour touch on the nose, perhaps from those red wine casks that are in there. But it's, yeah, it's lovely. Let's do the sensations and the texture. Sensations, still very salty, touch less though. Bit of sweetness coming out. Little bit of savoury as well with that bitter. And there is some sourness there. So it's a bit, the range has broadened a little bit, but the intensity is reduced, the addition of water. The texture is still the same, sort of lightly oily, also creamy, juicy. That little bit of heat's died off now. And I would say that the that tannic drying has also died down a bit. It's still there, but it's not quite as intense. So the taste, and then I'll introduce the bottles that I'm going to be featuring in part 17C. Lemon, lime, grapefruit, malty vanilla, coastal, salt, seaweed, a little bit of peatiness, like a tiny bit, just very faint in the background, but not much. It's not smoky at all, really, but just a touch peaty. And yeah, it's delicious, to be honest, and quite dynamic. It'll change in the glass as you leave it over time, and I do recommend it. How would I rate it in my rating system, which, if you've watched the channel before, you'll know I don't give marks out of 10 or percentages because I just don't think it's that useful. I asked myself 3 questions. Which are these? Would I buy the same bottle again? Yes. And I've bought pretty similar bottles, to be honest. I won't say exactly the same one, but would I buy this again if I saw it cheap? Yes, I would. I bought the classic Laddie before this, the non-age statement one, a few times over the years. I appreciate it's now got the 10-year-old age statement on, and it does show it's a bit more mature than what I remember the non-age statement release. And would I buy similar bottles again from Bruichladdich? Yes, I have. I've got the 10-year-old Bear Barley, which I would say is a similar bottle to this, but just using a specific grain variety, heritage grain variety. And yeah, would I buy from the same distillery again? Yes, I would. And although I would tend to gravitate for older bottlings to independent bottlers because it's cheaper generally and the quality is really good as well, there are some good older versions which you can get on offers sometimes, like the 18 and 21-year-old. Sometimes you see for pretty good prices. And yeah, all in all, I do like the distillery. I like what it's putting out, and I just think it's a really good balance of light and sort of intense coastal mineral notes as well. So that's my thoughts on that. Let me now introduce the 2 bottles that are going to feature in 2 reviews time in part 17C. So the first one is going to be, and it'll make sense why it's not going to be a public vote this time, hopefully. The first one's this, Port Charlotte 10, which I would say is the standard Port Charlotte expression. Also bottled at 50%, but heavily peated. And interesting to know about Bruichladdich is that they don't source their peated barley from Port Ellen maltings. They source it from on the mainland, and they use Highland peat for that, not Islay peat. But you're going to get coastal Islay influences because of the location of the distillery. Yeah, it doesn't have that TCP iodine sort of note I find from Port Charlotte. It's very different from you know, from other Islay heavily peated whiskies, but at the same time it's also very coastal, which you don't normally get, like say from Edredor, for example, which is a Highland, sorry, Balakin peated Edredor. It's Highland peat, but it's not coastal really, so you get a different view here because this is very, very coastal indeed, but it's using Highland peat, so it's just a different perspective on you know, on peat and stuff like that. So that's the first one that I'm going to be comparing it to, and you can probably guess what the second one is, to be honest. I've mentioned it already. It's Octomore. 15.1 is this one. It's aged 5 years, 2024 release, yes, 15.1. I believe it was matured in bourbon cask, and I think you tend to find that with the 0.1 releases, they're usually matured in bourbon cask. So although I wouldn't say that this is perhaps standard, it's not the 10-year-old, but I didn't want to fork out the money for the 10-year-old because I think it's quite expensive for what it is. I got this one on a bit of a discount. It's only the second ever bottle of Octomore that I had. I did have the 5.1 edition when that came out a long time ago, and I did enjoy it, but I did think it was, you know, it wasn't something that I'd be buying too often. So flash forward to like about, you know, nearly 15 years later, and I thought, right, it's time to get back into this. The design is still the same as I remember, to be honest. Or maybe 10 years later actually, since I last had it. And this one's peated at 108.2 parts per million, but obviously that's the figure before all the production. That's just at the when the malted barley was dried. So they don't give you the lower figure of what's actually in the bottle, unfortunately. But it's bottled at 59.1%, and I thought it would just be great to compare all three of the main expressions from Bruichladdich Distillery. The only discrepancy being that this isn't the 10-year-old, but I would say that it's not quite a standard bottling, but the 0.1 is the more standard cask type usually on all the releases. So I think it'll be a good comparison to these other two, because I think although the Port Charlotte 10 doesn't say the type of cask, I think it is mostly bourbon cask, maybe some ex-red wine cask as well, which Bruichladdich like to do. So I hope that's been enjoyable for you. I hope it's been interesting, and if you stick around for the next episode, which will be coming up a couple of days after this one drops, if you watch this one on the date it comes out, I will be talking about standard bottlings, what they can tell us, what they can't, and I'll also be showing you some examples of standard bottlings and a couple of not standard bottlings, just to sort of get that over to you. So that's it from me. Thank you for your time. Goodbye for now.